Mr. Radio Free Mormon, how are you?
Good evening, Mr. Real. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Doing so good. Life is good. Folks, welcome to another episode of Mormonism Live. Anything on your plate you want to share before we get started?
No, I'm very excited about tonight's show. I understand we have a very special guest in the green room.
Yeah, and let's bring him on. So we've got Dan Vogel, renowned scholar of Mormonism. Dan is one of, I got to just say, I always want to point people to this. I think it says a lot. Dan Vogel, you watch Mormonism Live on a regular basis.
Every week.
Yes, and you have said before, I'll let you say it again. Why do you watch Mormonism Live, Dan Vogel?
Because you guys are the smartest guys out there on the internet, in my opinion.
All right, I
my
love
humble opinion.
Yeah, we'll have you on once a month to say that. Thank you very much. Folks, Dan Vogel he's going to help us out tonight. Tonight, we're going to tackle the most recent, I believe it's episode 5 of theirs. It's on Book of Mormon Central. It's called A Marvelous Work. And this one is titled Who Actually Saw the Plates? And so we've named our episode Who Factually Saw the Plates, because we're going to tackle. Yeah, that's always a little play on words.
I like that.
So we've got Dan on, who's going to give us his what I will call his expert opinion on the historical documentary history of the church in terms of the witnesses, and give us his insights as we go through some of these video clips. And if you're ready, RFM and Dan, we'll jump into them. Sweet. So let me cue up the first one, and we don't get very far in. We start right at 0 seconds to have this happen. So let me here it goes.
I don't know, but I want my gold.
So I'm just going to start off here. Joseph Smith, first off, looks like a 40-year-old man. We'll get to that maybe later. But he's running pretty fast. He's got those plates that he's hefting, and he's heading through the woods at a pretty good clip.
That is sped up a little bit, isn't it?
No, I don't think she sped this one up. Maybe she did. Maybe it is 1.2.
I think it's sped up a little bit, but he's still. Maven, did you?
I sped this one up just a tad.
But he's booking it.
I did not speed up the next one.
Yeah, we'll watch Scott Christopher run as well, and we'll see if he does as well as Joseph Smith in his midlife crisis. But the point I want to make here is that it seems obvious he's not carrying a 70-pound item under his hands, and so you're letting the audience, you're sort of misleading the audience to perceive Joseph as being able to run with the plates, which is the story and the history that he's running to protect them and punching guys and dislocates his thumb by the time he gets back to the house. But if you're going to do it, guys, over at Book of Mormon Central, you got to put 70 pounds in his hands. And I got to imagine there's a reason why you didn't want him to have 70 pounds in his hands, because he wouldn't be able to run quite that fast. Have you guys ever tried to run with 70 pounds in your hands?
No, but I've tried to lift them. I have a long and storied career as a weightlifter. I mean, not professionally, but I have an idea as to how much stuff weighs, and 70 pounds is a lot of weight.
Yeah. It's not a light thing.
Well, even 40 to 60 is the estimate that William Smith and Martin Harris put on the plates. But, a nice, neat set of, 10 plates weighs around 70 pounds.
Yeah, it looks like he's carrying maybe a small bag of sugar or something underneath his arm.
Yeah.
It isn't much.
Supposed to happen at night. Wasn't this supposed to happen at night?
Yeah, it's why you take the black horse
and the
black carriage. What's that?
In one account, maybe.
I think it's if I'm not mistaken, it's the reason you go with the black horse and the black carriage, the black switch tail.
This is a different night.
This is a different night. Okay.
Yeah. So
the night when the sun was shining.
Yeah, he brings the plates. He brings the plates home. He doesn't bring the plates home on the in September. He hides them in a hollow log because he wasn't finished making them, is my opinion. The night wasn't long enough. They started late, at midnight. And he didn't get done with the plates, so he took the materials and hid them in a log. And then later he went and remember he was working for this widow, and he gets Emma comes and says, "Oh, the money diggers are trying to get your plates." And he looks in his seer stone and says, "No, they're perfectly safe." And then he goes and gets them. This is about 10 days later, so it's not in September anymore, probably.
Gotcha. Perfect.
Early October.
Yeah. Let's see Scott Christopher run with the plates. See if he does as well.
This is inspiring. This is like Jim Thorpe in the Olympics.
Jeez. I don't see anything.
I can't see it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I feel like I'm missing it.
Yeah, you are. You're definitely missing it.
I've got FOMO.
Let's see here.
Over here. There you go.
Jeez.
I'd have no problem catching that guy and knocking him over.
Well, notice he's running downhill.
Yeah.
Incredibly valuable.
And barely doing so.
Incredibly sacred place. I gotta take good care of him.
Whatever he's carrying seems to be heavier than what the first guy had. Anyway.
Or maybe he's just more out of shape.
Or maybe he's more out of shape.
It's Dan Peterson's lunch.
38 pounds of crap in a 10-pound bag.
Oh my gosh. Well,
okay,
we can end the show tonight. That's as good as it's gonna get, I think. That was incredible.
All right. So I just want to I'll just say in regards, Scott wasn't really running, number one. So if that was the right weight, that didn't go so well. And then
it was going to take him a long time to get back to the house.
Totally. And then in the first one, I feel like when Dan Peterson makes the movie Witnesses, he perceives the problem of having the actor who's playing Joseph Smith actually carry 70 pounds. So they give him about 20 pounds so that way he can run. And that sort of self-admits the problem and why you wouldn't want your actor running around with an actual 70 pounds to make it look real, because he couldn't run. At least
it wouldn't look good.
No, like we just saw with Scott, right? Like it wouldn't look good. All right, let's do the next one. So here we go.
It was in this humble home for a fairly large family where the angel Moroni first appeared unto Joseph.
Don't see anything.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm doing it again.
I did it that time for you.
Oh boy, let's try this again. I'm so sorry, folks. I'm gonna get
it was in this humble
here.
home for a fairly large family where the angel Moroni first appeared unto Joseph and told him of the plates buried nearby in the hill Gomorrah.
The only thing I wanted to say to this one is often, it's only been recent where the church has sort of started to depict pictures where the 2-room log cabin has got tons of kids all the boys are sleeping in the same bed. And you don't have any choice. That's how it has to be, because there's 2 rooms in this log cabin. But if Moroni is coming to visit, it seems as though, again, you can go, well, he's God and God can do anything and God can show up in the room and only wake up Joseph and make sure that everybody stays asleep. But if Joseph is really having any sort of manifestation where he's consciously awake rather than just dreaming a dream, it seems like it would be hard to do without disturbing the family. What's so funny, Arfa?
Dan Peterson's lunch. I'm going to be laughing about that for the rest of the night, I can tell you.
Well, especially if he was talking, but I imagine he was using the seer stone to see the spirit in when he was there in bed. He wasn't really doing it, but I imagine that's the story he told. But it's not the right cabin, by the way. This cabin is not the cabin that any of this stuff happened in. Even the reconstruction on the site is not on the Smith property at all. It's north of the Smith property, over the line into Palmyra Township, not Manchester Township. This is the cabin where they first lived when they moved down from Main Street and were farming. This was Samuel Jennings' cabin that they were renting from, and then in 1818, and then they bought the property across the line, the 100 acres, and that was in 1820, and they started building a cabin there on the other side that they built and they lived in while they were building the frame house. The frame house was begun in 1823, just before Alvin died. So they were living in a different cabin. And then Peter Ingersoll moved into that cabin, the one that they're talking about now. Peter Ingersoll moved into it after the Smiths moved into their cabin. And Peter Ingersoll talks about plowing on his land and then talking to the Smiths on the other side of that line, where they give an exhibition of, Joseph Smith Sr. does a little rod working for Peter Ingersoll because they're neighbors. And so they got the wrong cabin. They're a little stubborn about that, but it's the wrong cabin.
Yeah, well, we're going to find a lot of little historical hiccups. But the note there is just there's a lot of people in whatever cabin they're in, and Moroni's visit seemingly doesn't disrupt anybody. And again, you have to now make allowances for God to be working with supernatural magic that keeps everyone asleep and only wakes up Joseph Smith. Or you have to call it a vision or a dream that's unconscious. So there's that.
Well, it was a night-long conversation, wasn't it?
And into the morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And he keeps showing back up over and over again and repeating the stuff he said before and then adding some stuff to it each time.
Yeah, it seems like a lot going on in that room. Okay, here is...
I think Moroni slipped Joseph's brothers a Mickey.
Yeah, Moroni Cosby. Here we go.
Publication to this very day. Every single copy of the Book of Mormon contains the signed testimony of the 3 and the 8 witnesses. Their declaration that the Book of Mormon is true.
Yeah. And the only thing, I'll put the other slide up here.
From its original public.
So there. So I hear a lot of times, Dan, I'll give you a second to sort of correct the record, but I hear a lot of times that folks pinpoint the printer's manuscript and go, look, all the signatures are in Oliver Cowdery's handwriting. That's not, these guys didn't even sign the statement. And we wanted to just take a second tonight and sort of dispel that and put that away. If I'm not mistaken, Dan, this is the printer's manuscript. We don't have the original manuscript. We also will get to a statement later about from Martin Harris that talks about the 8 witnesses needing to be persuaded to sign it because they didn't quite agree with it, which almost certainly means that the original is signed by the 8 witnesses. And it's a bad critical argument to make that the 8 witnesses' signatures are in Oliver Cowdery's handwriting, and hence they never signed the document. That is the least rational answer based on what we know. Am I saying that correctly?
Right. Yeah. Well, some critics have latched onto it as just anything to throw at the witnesses. And this is Oliver Cowdery's handwriting in the printer's manuscript. We don't have the original, so we don't know what the signatures look like or whose handwriting it was originally written in, Joseph Smith's or Oliver Cowdery's. That would be very helpful, but we don't have it.
Yeah. Do you see the comment there? Analyzing Mormonism is saying David Whitmer said that Oliver signed for them and later said that they signed themselves. Do you know anything about that? Because I've never heard that.
No, I don't know what statement that is offhand.
Yeah, neither do I.
And if those are 2 separate statements, I don't know what's being referred to, but those could both be true.
Yeah.
One being with the original affidavit and the second being the printers, which is the one that they sent to the printers, right?
Yeah.
So it would make sense for Oliver Cowdery just to write their names down because all the printer's going to be doing is setting the type off of these names.
Yeah.
Right. So remember, David Whitmer was the one who owned this manuscript after Oliver Cowdery died, and people came to him to see this manuscript. So he would explain. I think somebody did point it out to him. Look, the signatures are all the same. That was maybe perhaps an explanation.
Yeah, and I think we'll see that Harris statement later, and I think that sort of indicates that with a little pressure, these 8 men actually did end up signing something. So we'll move on to the next one.
Well, if they didn't, they would have said.
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah, if it was an issue.
Brethren, this is an important day in the history of the world and in the work that we've been called to do. The Lord has commanded that additional witnesses should verify its authenticity and divinity of these ancient records.
So let's take a moment here.
Well, they sound like tin.
Yeah, they do sound a little like tin, huh? They're definitely not gold, are they?
Those are weird dimensions too, I got to tell you. It's much shallower and broader than I would have expected based upon the descriptions.
Yeah.
It doesn't look 6 inches.
No, they don't. By the way, this is the Joseph Smith. This is my favorite Joseph Smith so far. And this is the Joseph Smith. If you can, we'll see more of him later. That Rebecca Biblioteca and I have an argument going on. She thinks this guy looks more like Gene Wilder. I think he looks more like Jerry Seinfeld.
In either way, he's definitely in his 40s, right? He's in his 40s.
He's smiling all the time.
Yeah.
In the first video where we showed him running,
yes,
he should have been 21 years old. Correct? And here he should be 23, maybe 24 at most. And it appears to be a grown man.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
So I can't take credit for this idea, and I don't remember where I saw it, but someone, it might have been on the Reddit, was saying that they think this is the church kind of maybe taking on the daguerreotype, the
newest image,
the photograph, of Joseph Smith, that makes him look very different from the blonde-haired, blue-eyed version that we've been seeing, and that's possible. There's also another scene that that's in the slides that'll come up that I think is also the church attempting to kind of transition from one false narrative to a more truer one in steps, but I'll come back on, I guess, when we get there. So, but it's just an idea. I thought it was brilliant when I heard it, because you can see that they they gray his hair to make it, and this is a colorized version. This isn't what because the real one is black and white, or I guess silver, or gold maybe. Anyway. Yeah, I just thought maybe that is what they're trying to do, because they went out of their way to try to put gray streaks in the guy's hair, with either the makeup or the spray to make him look older, which was an interesting choice. Yeah, given what age he's supposed to be.
Definitely not a blonde anymore.
No, and at a minimum, a 23-year-old that they're putting gray in his hair, regardless of who they're trying to make him look like, this daguerreotype, Jerry Seinfeld or Gene Wilder, there appears to be a definite attempt being made to make Joseph Smith look substantially older and therefore more mature than he actually was at the time he would have been when these events were unfolding.
Yeah, and outside of Martin Harris, who would be in his 40s at the time, almost all the other participants in these experiences would have been young people, other than Joseph Smith Sr., would have been young people in their 20s.
I think David Whitmer was basically the same age as Joseph Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right, Dan?
I don't know exactly, but yes.
Yeah.
Right around.
So, yeah, that seems like, as you're pointing out, they want to depict Joseph as a more mature, older person rather than allow you to see sort of a young kid dealing with these situations.
Yeah, because otherwise what you've got there in these fundamental unfolding events of church history is basically the Midnight Mormons.
Right.
You just got a bunch of kids, And
you have one.
A lot of faith, believe me.
Cardin's in his 40s, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He's the
wearing his hat backwards.
He's the Martin Harris in the group.
All right. Let's take a look here at number 6.
Brethren, this is an important day in the history of the world and in the work that we've been called to do. The Lord has commanded that additional witnesses should verify if...
Oh, I think I already did this one. I'm so sorry.
I think you get...
Yeah.
That's
sorry about that.
That's what you want.
I am messing up a bunch.
Does it bother you when he talks about God? I can't take it.
It seems like a weird way to talk to people, doesn't it?
The affected voice. I mean,
yeah, he has the Mormon J accent going up to and including calling the assembled gentlemen brethren.
Yeah.
Did you notice that? It's not brethren, which I always thought was what it was supposed to be, but it's morphed into the distinctly Utah version of brethren.
The recreations when the LARPing, as I call it, because that's what it really looks like. These ones I sped up a little bit more than the other ones because they do talk really slowly. The spirit voice is really strong. So as bad as it is now, it's even more cringy if you watch the original.
That's how you
I
turn
wondered
40 minutes into a 2-hour movie.
yeah. Is it okay if I shared something really, really quick? Just a shout out to Analyzing Mormonism, Julia. She drafted together
Here.
in a slideshow. This is sorry, let me get it up here. The difference in what the plates look like according to the different witnesses. So here we go. Sorry, I'm just gonna pull this up and hopefully you guys can see it. So LDS Discussions on Mormon Stories has just done a 4-part series, all from Julia's research on the witnesses, the 3 witnesses, the 8 witnesses, other witnesses outside of that, and how they who they were, how they turned out. And so these when she's talking about what they saw, she kind of puts it there. You can see on the graph how very, very different even the dimensions were described by different people. Josiah Stowell said the plates were of a greenish cast, and Orson Pratt had claimed that they were stained with a black hard stain. And so those were, she goes through all kinds of inconsistencies like that. So it's a really good deep dive. So I just wanted to shout that out. And the image
Maven?
is really interesting, I thought.
So is
Yeah.
the one on the right the one that Joseph Smith Sr. describes?
I don't know. I'll have to, Julia in the chat
Yeah, he's
can
in the chat, I
throw
know.
it down, I think, because I don't know which one is which. Yeah.
Because that's the
So
one that looks more like the one that Joseph Smith is showing the 8 witnesses and putting on the stump, as opposed to the more, what I consider the more classic version of the gold plates, which is the one on the left, and which we see also at different times in this show.
yeah.
There are significant differences in how the witnesses who saw the plates describe them. And we'll see that here as we start off. I know, Dan, that you'll discount this this historical moment, this interview, right? And I want to just note the apologists want this one. They want to be able to use this. Dan, will you run us through the problems you see with it? And then I will tell you why I want to
read it first.
Yeah, so this is only one particular place. He says, in what place did you see the plates? In Joseph Smith's house. He had them there. Oops. Yeah, so not in the woods on a stump. This is John Whitmer, one of the 8 witnesses. And the apologists want this account. There's lots of accounts they don't want you to read, but they want you to read this one. They want to use this one. But notice that John Whitmer's statement doesn't match what we say happened in the church. In Joseph Smith's house, he had them there. Did you see them covered with a cloth? No. He handed them uncovered into our hands, and we turned the leaves sufficient to satisfy us. Were you all 8 witnesses present at the same time? No. At the time Joseph showed the plates to us, we were 4 persons present in the room, and at another time he showed them to 4 persons more. So, Dan, why is this account, again, I get that it's saying things that run counter to the faithful narrative, but what is it about this account that we shouldn't trust it?
Well, this one was done by Wilhelm Poulsen, MD, 1878, and he did another one with David Whitmer. The problem with the one with John Whitmer here was John had died before it got published, so he couldn't make any complaints. And Poulsen bends over backwards or strains really hard to make the experience as material as possible. And how, for example, how did he know to ask John, did you see them covered with a cloth? Well, where did that come from? Why did he ask that question? Why didn't he let John Whitmer tell him what happened? Why is he trying to lead the witness here? And so the interview that Poulsen gave to David Whitmer, David complained when it was published that it had some contrived conversation in it. And when you look close at that one, Poulsen tries really hard to make the three witnesses more usable for apologetic reasons. And that is, he describes Harris going away and then Harris coming back and the three having another vision altogether. So Poulsen knows what he needs to make the testimonies as watertight as possible, you know? And so he's trying to make the plates as materialistic as possible. And the problem is that more reliable sources contradict this one. This one has the air of being in the house and not in the woods. Lucy says the men of the families, the Whitmers and the Smiths, all went out to the grove together. And then they came back and told her about their testimony. This 4 at a time thing also is just foreign to this.
Yeah.
So John wasn't there to complain. And David Whitmer was, and he did complain. You know, so
right. David complains that the interviewer is inaccurate in how he portrays the interview.
Yeah, and this is what this would be termed an outlier.
Yeah.
Among the rest of our data that we have, what we'll be talking about sources that are better than Poulsen's.
And then what I would only add is that if you're an apologist, if you're a believer and you want to use this interview, then you better darn well start changing the artwork to reflect 2 different visits of 4 men, with 4 of them happening in the Joseph Smith house. And they're not being laid on a stump with 8 people then. And so you have to pick and choose. If you're unwilling to go, yeah, I just don't trust John. I don't trust John Whitmer when it comes to there being 2 sets of 4 in regards to this interview with Poulsen, then you're self-admitting that you don't trust the interview. And hence you shouldn't be using it for anything. And if you do want to use it, then you need to use it for everything. And if he said it happened with 2 groups of 4 and inside the Smith house, then darn it, you better start telling the history that way. You can't have it both ways, is my point.
Well, Richard Anderson tried to use this interview. And while he introduced it and gave explanation about Poulsen, that he sometimes allowed his imagination to cloud his reporting. And then I say, well, why are you quoting it then? If there's such a serious problem with Poulsen as a recorder of testimony.
Right. Why are you using it at all? Okay. All right. So this is one of your slides, Dan. Go ahead and run us through what you're thinking here.
All right. This is Theodore Turley, 1845, reporting of John Whitmer's statement in Far West, Missouri in April 1838. And this actually was copied down in Turley's memorandum. He had several items in it. This is one of them. He was in Far West, and he confronted John Whitmer because John Whitmer was associated with the dissenters. And right now, I'll tell you that this is only one piece of a historical event that took place in Kirtland and Missouri, where the dissenters, they were troubled over the Kirtland Bank issue and other issues with Joseph Smith, and were trying to form their own church with David Whitmer as the leader. And they were trying to decide whether they were going to, they knew Joseph Smith was a fallen prophet, but they didn't know how far they should go, whether they should include the Book of Mormon or exclude the Book of Mormon. Some of them wanted to keep the Book of Mormon. Some of them wanted to exclude the Book of Mormon. Martin Harris was among the dissenters who was having problems with Joseph Smith's leadership. He wanted to tell them to keep the Book of Mormon. We'll see how that turns out in a minute. But right here, while that's going on in Kirtland, this is going on here in Missouri. So it's not just a one event with Martin Harris and Kirtland. Martin Harris was misunderstood, and how apologists try to get out of the source we're going to talk about after this one. But this one is pretty direct and clear. So Turley asks John, you have published to the world that an angel did present those plates to Joseph Smith, meaning Joseph Smith, he was one of the 8 and had evidence that Joseph Smith did have the plates which the angel had given him. That's what that means. And Whitmer answered, I now say I handled those plates. There was fine engravings on both sides. I handled them. And he described how they were hung with the rings. And they were shown unto me by a supernatural power. Well, that doesn't sound like plates sitting on a log there. It sounds like there's more to it, that maybe the published testimony is a little bare boned, just like the testimony of the 3 witnesses is bare boned also.
Yeah, Dan, can I just tell you how this strikes me, which is, of course, being a faithful Mormon for many decades and studying stuff, I know that there are 2 separate sets of witnesses. There's the 3 witnesses, there's the 8. The 3 witnesses had, as it is taught in the church, a visionary experience, including an angel, a table. They never touched the plates. The angel turns the leaves. The voice of God comes and tells them that this is the word of God and to bear record of it. But then you've got the 8 witnesses, which is a decidedly unspiritual event. It is very pedestrian. It's just 8 guys getting together around a log, and Joseph Smith walks up, just like they're portraying it in the movie in that scene, right? And putting it on the log, showing it to them, and then they can pick it up and they can turn the plates, and then they're going to bear witness. So it does seem out of joint for one of the 8 witnesses to be saying at this early date in 1838 and then written down in 1845 that they were shown to me by a supernatural power.
Right. And so that is actually the historical context when you reconstruct it, that the promise to the 3 witnesses that they would see it with an eye of faith. They would see the angel and the plates with an eye of faith. And because they have, an eye of faith, and what Martin Harris would call the spiritual eye, or the eye of a visionary eye, the mind's eye.
And we'll see later. I mean, some of these statements sort of indicate that there is an object. The object is covered, and this statement sort of fits into that. Like, you can have a physical experience where the plates, some object is there. It's covered up though. So you're allowed to lift it. I handled those plates. There were fine engravings on both sides. You could feel through the sheet that there was something etched onto them. I handled them. That still fits. But then when it says, and they were shown to me by supernatural power, that seems to indicate that you didn't literally see the plates themselves, that you saw them, as you point out, Dan, in your mind's eye.
Right.
This seems to mesh with other statements that we'll see here that follow, that seem to indicate that they were given something, but that something was obscured, and they had to sort of have a hunch of what was underneath the covering of what that object was instead.
So when I talk about the historical context, is that the Revelation DNC 17, which was given in June 1829, before the 3 witnesses had their vision, promised them that they shall see them by faith, the same as Joseph Smith has seen them. But then you a few weeks later, or a few days or weeks, you have these 8 men seeing the plates in a natural way. Doesn't fit. Because of the instructions that the 3 had to have faith in order to see them. Even Joseph Smith had to have faith to see them. And so it doesn't fit that they're natural. And what I'm arguing is that during the time period, those on the inside knew what the true facts were.
Yeah.
The general public reading the published testimony, and now all we have is the published testimony, will assume certain things about it, and that's quite intentional in the wording. And as we'll see, they hesitated to sign it for that reason, because it gave the wrong impression. And this is what Martin Harris will argue in my next quote, which I guess we'll just go right to it.
Yeah, and I would want to just say here, and it needs to be said at some point tonight, there's a game that gets played in the correlated curriculum, and there's a game that gets played in apologetics, where you only put before the believer the most faithful telling of the historical events upon which Mormonism's truth claims are founded. And so another example, and you even see it in the church early on, in instances like this and other ones we see where people are like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that, I gave too much away, where some of the early accounts talk about the seer stone, but before it's all said and done, there's this move to start describing it as the Urim and Thummim. And what you're doing is you're sort of intentionally, I shouldn't say sort of, you're intentionally deceiving the audience of the information. And I've got a friend who I went out to coffee with this week, and she said, you know what gets old is that everything I learned in the church was this certain telling of the story, and the church just never trusted me enough to give me all of the information, which is what's needed to make an educated, informed decision. And they hold back the full telling. They want you to see this statement by the three witnesses, but they don't want you to see that. They want you to see Mary Elizabeth Rawlings Lightner putting the Book of Commandments in her dress, but they don't want you to know that she's a plural wife of Joseph Smith. They want you to know that it's a Urim and Thummim, but they don't want to tell you that it was a seer stone. And you see this over and over and over again, and you see it plenty of times in this witnesses video that's being used by Scott Christopher and Book of Mormon Central in the way in which they present this information. So anyway, there's that. Okay, here's the next one. Stephen Burnett's 1838 report of Martin Harris's public statements in Kirtland, Ohio.
Yes, and so this is Stephen Burnett, and a letter to Lyman E. Johnson, a former member of the Quorum of 12 Apostles, living in far west Missouri. So Burnett says, he writes, Johnson, I have reflected long and deliberately upon the history of this church and weighed the evidence for and against it, loath to give it up. So I highlight that because he's not biased. He doesn't want to give it up, but he gives it up because what he hears Martin Harris say. But when I came to hear Martin Harris state in public that he never saw the plates with his natural eyes, only in vision or imagination. Now, the imagination part is, of course, Burnett's conclusion. Neither Oliver Cowdery nor David Whitmer, and also that the 8 witnesses never saw them, and that is, with their natural eyes, and hesitated to sign that instrument for that reason, but were persuaded to do it. The last pedestal gave way, in my view, our foundations was sapped, and the entire superstructure fell a heap of ruins.
Yeah.
So, what I'm drawing out of this here, also, not only is the 3 witnesses, they saw the plates with their spiritual eyes, like the Revelation had promised, but that the 8 witnesses never saw them with their natural eyes. I'm filling that in because that's the context, as you'll see as we go a little bit further here. But they hesitated to sign it because it gave the false impression that it was a totally naturalistic situation because of the wording. Now, my argument has been to Richard Anderson when he was alive and others apologists is that if you try to reconstruct the experience of the 8 witnesses by reading the testimony, published testimony only, you're bound to fail in that because you're going to make a lot of assumptions. You're going to assume that the plates were there, they turned the leaves, and when the language is a little vague, as many of the leaves as the said Smith did translate, we did handle with our hands. I mean, that's a little different than saying, oh, we turned every page over, you know. But the clue to making this mistake with the 8 witnesses comes if you tried to reconstruct the testimony of 3 witnesses, which we know a lot more about now from subsequent statements. If you just tried to reconstruct their experience with the angel and the plates, you would get it wrong. Okay. You would assume, like a lot of artists, and even the plaque on the Angel Moroni on top of the hill Cumorah is historically inaccurate because it has all 3 witnesses there with Joseph Smith and the angel and the plates. But and that's all. If you read the testimony of the 3 witnesses, Joseph Smith's not mentioned being there at all. You know, the 2 were with Joseph Smith. Oliver Cowdery and David Whitmer, and Martin Harris left. Then Joseph Smith went to Martin Harris, and they had a vision. And Joseph Smith, in the history, which is the first time this was publicly even revealed in the 1838 history that was published in 1842, it was the first time that the public learned that that Harris had seen the vision separately. But when Joseph Smith writes about it in the history of the church, he says, the same vision appeared to us, at least it did so to me. He even had to qualify that. So if you're going to get, if you all you had was that printed testimony of the 3 witnesses and tried to reconstruct their what they had happened to them, you wouldn't know about the table and the other objects like the sword of Laban and the Liahona. You wouldn't know about any of this stuff going on. You wouldn't even know Joseph Smith was even there. Okay. So if you try to do that with the testimony of 8 witnesses, you probably are getting it wrong. Okay. You're making a mistake. And so you have to exploit the outside testimony like you do for the testimony of 3 witnesses to reconstruct it. You have to use all of it, not just some of it. Unfortunately, most of the 8 witnesses died. Like 3 of them died before 1836. Then Joseph Smith, then not Joseph Smith, but Hiram Smith died, and Samuel Smith died in the 1840s in Nauvoo. The only 2 remaining afterwards, Joseph Smith Sr. in 1840, the only 2 afterwards was Hiram Page, the Whitmer's brother-in-law. He lived to 1852. And then John Whitmer was the last one to be alive until 1887, I believe it is. So you have to use whatever little you get. And this is part of it here. Mostly the apologists will emphasize that whenever the 8 witnesses made statements, it was always reaffirm their original statement. And that's all they did, is reaffirm the original statement. But if if you understand the original statement wrong, then you're going to understand their reaffirmation of their testimony wrong. And it really doesn't add up to anything. Okay. So you have to pay attention to these rare occasions where we get these hints with John Whitmer in Missouri. And here we have Martin Harris, and he's speaking, it's his 3rd person. He's speaking in behalf of the other witnesses. Okay. But you can't deny he doesn't know them well. And he's making it a public statement. This isn't a private statement or anything. He's in the church speaking in the Stone Church in Kirtland, Ohio, to the other dissenters, to a crowds of people that have come there. He's not trying to hide anything. He makes those statements in public that were never really challenged, okay, by any of the witnesses in Missouri or in Kirtland. Okay. So
let me jump in here for a minute, Dan.
Okay, I'm done with that for now.
So RFM, you and I grew up in the church with this idea that by having the 3 witnesses have a spiritual testimony and the 8 witnesses have a physical testimony, those two substantiate each other because they're different. So they're sort of 2 different legs of a table. What are your thoughts the moment you start to wrestle with this record and you realize there are multiple witness statements, including Martin Harris? And again, maybe secondhand, but more than one occasion where there's this reference, and John Whitmer from the quote previous to this, where this references that the 8 witness experience isn't a physical experience. It's only supernatural or visionary or spiritual eyes too. Now you have the entire witness, all 11 witnesses seeing something that may not have physically taken place. That seems to do a lot of damage, doesn't it?
Well, it's certainly not as powerful as it was portrayed to me about these 2 separate witness testimonies being mutually reinforcing. The 3 with the spiritual vision and the 8 with a very prosaic experience of just seeing some plates and hefting them and turning over the pages. And now I see this and I go, wait a second. Has the church been portraying the 8 witnesses scenario as just matter of fact, when actually some of the witnesses describe it differently as being a supernatural event?
Yeah, more than one witness on more than one occasion. Again, if you trust Martin Harris to be speaking for the 8 on any level, it seems as though both experiences have supernatural facets to them.
Yeah, and that whole thing about and hesitated to sign that instrument for that reason. This whole statement by Stephen Burnett gives me anxiety because I know how I would have responded to this as a faithful believing Mormon, which is I would have wanted to reject this and think, for whatever reason, this is not right. But the reason I would feel that way, ironically, is the exact same reason that Stephen Burnett gives for being so upset by it, because he was loath to give up Mormonism, as was I. I fought it every step of the way. I tried as hard as I could to find a way to make this church true. And eventually it all crumbled to dust in my hands. So I feel a very sympathetic spirit with this fellow. And now that I'm no longer a faithful believing Mormon, by which I mean only going to look at one side of the information, I have to look at this in a different way and think, yeah, that sounds like the way a reasonable person, or at least I, would respond in the same situation, having experienced and heard the same things.
Yeah. Had you heard Martin Harris tell you that the 8 witnesses did not have a physical experience, you would be compelled to doubt. There are compelling reasons to doubt. I'm playing on your friend from the church history,
Kyle McKay.
Yeah, church historian. Okay, let's move on to the next one here. All right, so physically handling the plates while seeing them spiritually. Here's another quote from Stephen Burnett to Lyman E. Johnson. Run us through this one, Dan.
All right. So we have a conflict in the testimony of the 8 witnesses. They mention handling them physically, and then on other occasions we learn that they saw them spiritually. So how do we solve this half physical, half spiritual description? And I believe this Stephen Burnett's letter contains a clue to do that. I believe that Harris actually is talking about the 8 or implying this is what happened to the 8 is the same thing that happened to him with the plates before he had his vision of the angel in the plates. So he says, Burnett, Harris rose and said he had hefted the plates repeatedly in a box or with only a tablecloth or handkerchief over them. But he never saw them, only as he saw a city through a mountain, and said that he never should have told that the testimony of the 8 witnesses was false if it had not been picked out of him.
Yeah. He doesn't seem to be denying it. In other words, let me say it this way. The way he words it around the 8 witnesses, he's not saying that what I said was false. I just wish it hadn't been picked out of me. I just wish I hadn't said it.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of seeing a city through a mountain, that just seems so logically explained as the plates being covered by something, which they're saying there in the quote. And you sort of have, so the plates are there, they're covered, nobody can see them, lest they might die. And so all of you witnesses have to sense that they're there. You can feel them, you can lift it, but to know for absolute certain, you're going to have to see it in some other mode than your literal eyesight.
Because that's the DNC 17, the Revelation to the 3 says that you can't see them, you can only see them through the power of God. And so it makes no sense that the 8 witnesses would see them naturally only days after that. And I think this is an explanation as to why the 8 witnesses were not all that featured in the 19th century, that the 3 witnesses received the most attention. And so what Harris seems to be saying is that he saw the plates through the cloth or through the box while he held them, and repeatedly.
And this is the same guy who saw Jesus Christ in the form of a deer, meaning when he says he saw things with his spiritual eyes, that's also not trustworthy. He saw a lot of things and interpreted things in sort of absurd ways.
Yeah, so later we'll talk about the tension between hallucination and theoretically true religious experiences.
Yeah.
Dan, I have a question for you about this statement from the Stephen Burnett letter to Lyman E. Johnson. Sorry, that's how they say Burnett down in Texas is Burnett. But that last line seems potentially explosive, where it says, and said, referring to Martin Harris, that Martin Harris said that he never should have told that the testimony of the 8 witnesses was false if it had not been picked out of him. Now, in the context of this letter, does it give any more details as to what he means when he's saying that the testimony of the 8 is false? False in what way? Do you know?
Yeah, well, some people would interpret it as that it's just a complete lie and made up, but I don't. I interpret it as he's implying that they did not see it with their natural eyes. They also did not see it. Okay. So in that first quote, the word also changes it a little bit, where it says, hold on. Of course, it's being filtered through Burnett and not Harris. So I don't know how much you would hang on to every certain little word, but Harris stated in public that he never saw the plates with his natural eyes, only in vision or imagination. Neither Oliver Cowdery nor David Whitmer, and also that the 8 witnesses never saw them. So you could stop right there and just say, well, it's a complete fabrication, and that's why they didn't want to sign it, because it wasn't true. But I read it as he's just denying that they saw it in any other way than what the revelation had promised, because there's other statements, Warren Parrish in August, a couple of months later, 1838, several months actually. He says in the Evangelist, Carthage, Ohio, October 1838, Martin Harris, one of the subscribing witnesses, has come out at last and says he never saw the plates from which the Book of Mormon purports to have been translated, except in vision. And he further says that any man who says he has seen them in any other way is a liar, Joseph Smith not accepted.
So, Dan, if I'm understanding you correctly here, what you're angling toward is that both the 3 witnesses and the 8 witnesses all had a visionary experience. It was supernatural. They weren't beholding anything with their natural eyes. It was all done with their spiritual eyes. and by the eye of faith. And then over time, earlier and later, the words that were used to describe their testimony were manipulated in such a way as to make it sound more real than visionary.
Yeah, but it doesn't. They saw the plates, but it doesn't say how they saw the plates.
And if the
Public
8
testimony
witness
leaves that part, it says we saw the plates, we saw the engravings, but they don't talk about how they saw them. And John says he saw them through supernatural power. And Harris is implying that they also had this eye of faith. Or Burnett is implying that they also did not see them, because he starts off by saying Harris did not see them except in vision. He adds that.
Right.
And that the 8 witnesses also did not see them. I don't think that they're implying that they lied.
Right.
If they were given a statement that said they held, they hefted the plates that were obscured by a cloth or hidden in a box and saw with their spiritual eyes that these plates were real, they would have signed it happily, because that was what that's what they experienced. But they were sort of pushed to sign something that's carefully worded, knowing that it didn't exactly represent their experience. And Martin is telling the crowd that that's what happened.
Yes. And so the statements are really poorly made, because they have no date, they have no place it took place, no time, no circumstances, nothing, just a bare bones statement. And when that happens, you usually know that they're trying to unify diverse experiences. Could your experience get you to sign this? Forget about trying to accommodate everybody's version or experience. So that even the 3 witnesses, that statement is, Harris would have to say, I could sign that statement, and David Whitmer would have to say, oh, I could sign that statement, even though it was separate experiences. So they left a lot of things out. And just bare boned it to get a simple statement. There's nothing to be all that proud about with these statements, because as we'll see, the Shakers have much better statements. Dated, circumstances, everything.
I am starting to see how later on in life with these witnesses that it could come out, because they have one experience that they understand they had visionary, and then they have this testimony which goes out to the world, which sounds a lot more concrete and brass tacks than what they actually experienced. So they're out there talking about their testimony, and they talk about it being more visionary, like David Whitmer or Martin Harris. And then people who hear it think that they are denying their testimony. So there's these several episodes where reporters or somebody report, oh, this person, they denied their testimony. And then they have to come back and say, no, I didn't deny it. But I think it may be this fundamental misunderstanding that's going on.
You're reading David Whitmer's Address to All Believers in Christ, and then there was that John, I forget the guy's name, that lived near David Whitmer, was claiming that David Whitmer had denied his testimony, or that it was no better than the Quakers' experiences and things that happen at the revivals or with other mystics.
And by the way, spiritual. I know we're going to go long, and I apologize, but I was reading through this, and on page 32, you had mentioned the issue about each of the 3 witnesses having maybe a different experience, and what they end up signing as a declaration being what they could all agree to, because we know, number one, that all 3 of them did not see it together, even according to the history of the church. First, there was the 2, and then they had to go find Martin Harris, who had separated himself because he thought he was the reason that no angel was showing up. And then they have all these other different things that they were supposed to see in the vision, with the table, with the sword of Laban, with all these other things that don't appear in their witness statement. But here, David Whitmer, I know it's late in life for him. It's actually, 1887 when he writes this, but he adds a detail to his visionary account when he is talking or writing about it. He says, of course, I do not mean to place one book ahead of the other, the Book of Mormon and the Bible. I am also called to bear witness that the Bible is true. And then he says this interesting fact. it gets better put fact in air quotes. The angel who declared unto us that the Book of Mormon was true also declared unto us that the Bible was true. And I thought that was remarkable, because in the statement of the three witnesses, yeah, they have the first part about the Book of Mormon, but they don't have anything in there about the angel saying anything about the Bible being true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll go to the next quote. This one ought to be kind of fun along the same lines for Harris.
This is a different letter.
Yeah, this is different source. This one's John A. Clark, letter to dear brethren, August 1840 in the Episcopal Recorder, September 1840. And John A. Clark was a minister in Palmyra in the late 1820s, and he knew Harris personally and talked to Harris about his experience and other things. Anyway, so Johnny Clark reported a conversation between Harris and an attorney, an unnamed attorney, about Jerome Clark or some guy, I forget, about seeing the plates before his vision of the angel in the plates. So the attorney asked Harris, "Did you see those plates?" Harris replied, "He did." "Did you see the plates and the engravings on them with your bodily eyes?" Harris replied, "Yes, I saw them with my eyes. They were shown unto me by the power of God and not of man." "But did you see them with your natural, your bodily eyes, just as you see this pencil case in my hand? Now say no or yes to this." Harris replied, "Why, I did not see them as I do that pencil case, yet I saw them with the eye of faith. I saw them just as distinctly as I see anything around me, though at the time they were covered over with a cloth." So this adds a little more, another testimony to Harris, and supports Burnett's account of Harris, saying that he had to experience the plates and seeing them through the cloth.
Can you imagine how many times these guys were cornered? Now, come on. Was it your real eyes or not? Was it? And you can just imagine being asked this over and over and over again. And you're trying to say it in a way that's faith promoting. But if the guy keeps pushing, which he does here, you end up giving a different answer, sort of admitting you saw them with your spiritual eyes, that they were covered with a cloth. And what you're starting to see now is 2, 3, 4 statements coming from different avenues that sort of point to this being, for both sets of witnesses, some sort of supernatural experience. And for the 8, a supernatural experience where maybe there's an object, but it's covered and there's no way to really know for sure what it is, but your spiritual senses tell you that it is the plates. And here you've got Martin saying the same thing, that if the angel showed him the plates, now you're having to buy a story where the angel shows the plates covered with a cloth. Right? This is Martin Harris.
This is before he saw the vision with the three. This is
before.
Before he had experiences with the plates being covered. He had seen them, but he was after a greater witness. Remember, D&C 5 is given in March 1820.
What tells you that this quote is Martin Harris telling you about a time before his 3-witness experience?
Because he's seeing it. He held it many times. He's seen it many times.
Yeah.
He held it on his, one says he held it on his knee for half an hour while talking to Joe Smith, and he could see him.
So yeah, but here's what I mean though. If somebody came, I'm one of the 3 witnesses, and somebody comes to me and they go, "Hey, did you see the plates?" I know the guy's asking me about my witness experience. And yes, maybe generally in other occasions, but specifically I'm a special witness of these plates. It seems like if that's the case, he really wants to avoid talking about that 3-witness experience, and he'd rather talk about the time that they were in a sheet and he hefted them. It seems like a strange thing.
Oh, I see.
That makes
why
sense.
doesn't he talk about the angel in more
Right.
detail?
That would be the natural thing to do. And he sort of senses that this guy needs something more concrete. And the only concrete experience I have is that they were sitting inside a sheet. I think they were in there and I hefted them and I touched them, but never.
Well,
never
so if you see him in a vision, true, you don't know that anything's material or that Joseph Smith really had any plates.
Right.
Okay, so maybe he would gravitate towards telling those stories.
Harris sees his other experiences as having more merit to them than his witness experience when somebody is questioning him and looking for concrete details.
Yeah, did Joseph Smith really have the plates?
Yeah.
And that's all the 8 witnesses were there for. There was a material object. Joseph Smith actually had some material object. So anyway, I think that concludes my.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Any thoughts from you, RFM? We'll go to the next clip.
I was just going to add that I think that these gentlemen, in their particular milieu, may have thought that seeing something with spiritual eyes was actually more real than seeing something with their physical eyes. I don't think that they thought that this was inferior necessarily to see something with your spiritual eyes. I mean, you're seeing the real stuff that's behind this curtain of reality. But I think it comes out, and now we look at it and we start saying, oh, you didn't really see it. This is a visionary experience that you had. And in our day, that seems to be less substantive than actually seeing with your real eyes. What do you think about that, Dan?
Well, it certainly mattered. We're in the age of reason here with deism and everything else floating around America and denying miracles. So spiritual testimony doesn't matter too much to those kinds of people. But it did matter to other religious people, visionary people, and people that were revivalists that were having similar type visions during the revivals, that they were attending and at home, and they were having conversion visions of Jesus, and all sorts of things were happening in Joseph Smith's environment. But no, I think the people were highly suspicious of the overheated imagination.
And I have a sense that they knew that other people would feel that way about their visionary experience. And so they couched it to make it sound more reasonable, more tactile, more material.
That seems like the best lens to see all of this through, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what's going on, RFM. Okay, here is the next one.
The Lord requires us, even the greatest doubters, to have faith. We operate by faith. If he wanted to, he could have he said, Joseph, here are the plates. Go show them to anyone who wants to see them. Yeah. Here they are. Here are the characters. Here's the stuff. Here we go. Now, it's very sacred and holy, and I get that. But if the Lord had wanted to, he could have given us all kinds of evidence, right?
The only thing I want to say there,
evidence in quotation marks, is right.
The only thing I want to say there is it's a what if game. It's sort of like God is with God, all things are possible. If God wanted to, he could do anything he wants, but that's not a really good argument. Anybody can say that. It's a wood tool. Any religious system could have an advocate for that system say something just like that. It's a meaningless statement. In other words, it just doesn't mean anything. That's
well, it also raises the unstated question usually that God could have done this. God didn't do this. So why didn't he? Now, I know the point that Scott Christopher's trying to make, and everybody's thoroughly agreeing with him, is that God didn't do it. Therefore, there must be a good reason why he didn't do it. And so now we just ferret out the reason, and it usually has something to do with we need to have faith, right? But the other side of it is, God could have done this and avoided all of these issues that people have. So why didn't God do that? Well, maybe it's because he wasn't really involved very heavily in this whole process.
I say
that's the most rational answer.
God operates much like a con artist, drawing you in with just enough to prime the pump.
Yeah. Okay, here's the next one.
Bill, I got to ask you,
Please.
Scott Christopher, our host, why is it whenever he talks about evidence as it relates to the Book of Mormon, he feels compelled to put it in air quotes on camera?
Well, it seems like subconsciously he sort of recognizes that all of the things he says are evidence aren't really evidence.
What do
He
you
seems
think,
to
Dan?
have some doubt.
Sorry, Bill. What
That's
do you think,
okay.
Dan?
Well, this isn't very. The witnesses are not very strong evidence. You can't tell the difference between a real vision and a hallucination, really. And so, the way to solve the vision between the vision and hallucination would be to solve whether the Book of Mormon is an actual history or not. So you have to go back to the Book of Mormon and start doing the real work and work with what you have that's tangible material, something to work with, rather than some flimsy testimonies about some spiritual experiences. So if the Book of Mormon's not history, if we decide the Book of Mormon is not history, even academics can decide whether the Book of Mormon is not a history or not. Well, that has implications for how we view the testimony of the witnesses. So if the Book of Mormon is not history, there were no Nephites, there were no plates, there were no Moroni that appeared to Joseph Smith. It was a lie, and there was no angel to appear to the witnesses either.
Yeah.
So but if it's real history, then we have to follow that line. But so far, that side of the thing is losing.
Yeah. Okay, here's the next one.
Brother David Whitmer.
Why, yes, Brother Joseph.
David, the Lord made known you were coming to visit. I'm just glad you came.
The Lord made known?
Of course. I saw that you spent a night in a tiny inn south of Palmyra. Would it be better called a tavern? And then you spent 2 nights underneath a wagon. I'm glad it didn't rain. It was quite a journey.
Brother Joseph, I've come to...
David, I know why you've come. And I'm glad. Thank you. Your help is greatly needed in moving this work forward. Come in. Come in and meet Emma.
Go ahead, RFM.
Well, if you're under a wagon for 2 nights, does it matter if it rains? I thought that was a place you wanted to be if it rained.
Yeah. There's lots of problems with this. First off, they're misrepresenting what David Whitmer said and what Joseph said. The conversation didn't happen that way. Number one. And again, I don't have the script here of what was said in the historical document, but Dan shared it with me a couple days ago, and it is not 2 days under a wagon. That's just not part of the script. But here's the other problem. They treat it as if Joseph Smith knows through spiritual means that David Whitmer has shown up. But Lucy Mack Smith shares in her story that David Whitmer, and Dan pointed this out before the show we were talking, but Lucy Mack Smith in her biography, The Progenitors of Lucy, whatever, of the Smiths and Joseph Smith Jr., the biography of Joseph Smith Jr., she points out that there's communication between Joseph Oliver and David. David has to clear his field before he can leave to go help with the translation. He claims some spiritual thing where somebody clears his field for him, but that allows him to leave on time. If you leave on time, the other people know you're coming. So if they know you're coming, they don't get to also pretend that you surprised them, but not really, because God told them that you were coming. They already knew through secular means that David Whitmer was coming. It wasn't a surprise. It shouldn't have been a surprise to anybody. Joseph Smith didn't need revelation from God to know that Whitmer was showing up. They already had a plan in place that Whitmer was showing up. Am I right, Dan?
Oh, yeah. They were expecting him there. But I got to say that I can't watch that scene without thinking, why are these guys dressed so nicely when they live in a shack?
It's a good point. And look how young David Whitmer is. Look how young he is. That's how old Joseph Smith should be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guys are effectively the same age. By the way, I want to tell you this little story I've never told before, okay? But it was in 8th grade. And back then, do you remember Evelyn Wood reading dynamics?
Yeah.
Where you could go pay money and take a course to learn how to speed read. It was a huge thing. They had commercials all over the place back in the early 70s. And I never did that, but I learned a little bit about it. And I sort of learned, you put your fingers across the page. I'm doing this right here because that's kind of what they show you, right? And I could read a little bit, but I couldn't do it very well at all. Anyway, I had been reading a book, and I can't remember what the book was. It was about a young detective and his pal and some girl, and they went out and solved mysteries and had adventures. Okay. I had read that book and found it very enjoyable. I find myself now in an 8th grade classroom, and I'm talking with my friend over here in the seat next to me. And guess what he's reading? He's reading the same book. And I now launch into this thing about how I've taken this entire class from Evelyn Wood and I learned how to speed read. And he says, no way. I said, yeah, here, give me that book. I'll show you. And so I open it up and I go through it and I sort of refresh myself on what happens in the first chapter. And then I just close it up and I tell them what happens in the first chapter. That pump was totally primed at that point. And I sense the same kind of thing going on here with Joseph Smith.
Yeah. And then Dan also brought it to my attention that Joseph and Oliver meet David Whitmer across the property. It's not like David shows up at the door. The story just didn't happen this way. And so as you're pointing out, like, it's easy if you know things are going to happen, it's easy to step forward and claim that you've got some spiritual insight, but you already knew through some other means, like RFM, like you're reading the book months earlier or whatever, and these kind of games are the games that seem to get played anyway.
Yeah, well, I see a lot of similarity between some of the things Joseph Smith used to do in his early days as a young psychic, but no longer did later because it was a little harder, which is making people believe that he knew all about them or where they were, and he could see them whenever he wanted. He couldn't keep that up, but at this point, he did it with Josiah Stoll, which is another story, but he did it with David Whitmer. Well, Oliver Cowdery and David Whitmer are corresponding, and things are getting a little hot there. Joseph Smith's getting persecuted, and he's having difficulty doing the translation. And Oliver Cowdery writes his friend, his acquaintances. He had stopped by the Whitmers on his way to Joseph Smith's place. David Whitmer and Oliver Cowdery had met, I believe, in Manchester when David Whitmer was there on a business trip. But and they kept up a friendship, and then Oliver Cowdery stopped by on his way down to see Joseph Smith, and then they kept up a correspondence, and then they got in trouble, and so Oliver Cowdery was relaying this information back to the Whitmers, and they offered to take them in so they could finish the translation. So they agreed, and there was an agreed time that David Whitmer would come. And David Whitmer believed that he had received divine aid that would allow him to finish plowing his fields on time to get to Harmony at the specified time. So it was no surprise. But the exact time, of course, they didn't know. But Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith rode out on their horses and met David Whitmer coming down the major thoroughfare in his wagon to move them back to Fayette, New York, about 120 miles. And David Whitmer was surprised that they could greet them. And Oliver Cowdery says, well, Joseph knew you were coming. And he also saw in his stone where you had stayed. And what is mentioned in the sources, like Edward Stevenson, is that Joseph Smith had read the signs of the hotels where he had stayed. Now, I don't remember anything about laying under a wagon, and this mentions that, I saw you about south of Palmyra. Whoever wrote that dialogue doesn't seem to know the geographic situation there, because Palmyra is way up north, and Joseph Smith lives south of that in Manchester, and David Whitmer lives, east of that between the Finger Lakes. And when he goes to Harmony, he just goes straight down between the Finger Lakes, Seneca Lake, and then curves to the more east and goes right down using the major thoroughfare underneath the Finger Lakes. He's nowhere near Palmyra or Manchester even, or even Canandaigua for that matter. Well, so I don't know who wrote that or how that got there. I don't remember anything about him going by Palmyra, south of Palmyra.
Yeah.
So at any rate, so they don't meet by David Whitmer knocking on the door. And I would explain, if there's a naturalistic explanation to it, plus not only naturalistic explanation, you have to give a little allowance to time that transpired, in which people that are providentially minded tend to make things more miraculous as the time goes on, and make it even more difficult to answer. But I would just say that Joseph Smith, living on his front door, is literally just feet away from the major highway. And there's people going and coming all the time through there along the Susquehanna River down to the port in Delaware, So Whitmer's in a wagon. He's moving slower. There's people riding horses moving faster. And Joseph Smith just happens to ask, probably when he's out there getting water or whatever, hey, did you see some guy? We're expecting some guy to come. Did you see a guy in a wagon heading this way? And gave a description because, Albert Cowdery knows him. Well, that's probably what you would call hot reading. You might have heard of cold reading, where people just lead you along and they make a bunch of misses, and finally they get a hit and you forget the misses and you keep progressing that way from more general to more specific things. Well, this is exploiting information that the other person doesn't know you have, but you do have it and you exploit it, and it makes it seem, you create an effect of being able to see. And so I'm comparing Joseph Smith to psychics.
Yeah. Okay. Let me, so just FYI, we're on slide 15 now. I think there's about 45 slides total. So let's go a little longer, see if we can't get about halfway. And then I think we'll end up stopping. And Dan, if you can join us for, I think, a part 2 then next week. And if we need to push it maybe another week after that, if RFM, if you've got something planned, we'll do so. But let's go from there. So let's start here.
Great.
This one, by the way,
in that glass, by the way, what are you drinking? Is that like Hawaiian punch?
It's a real Hawaiian punch. No,
is it really?
No, it's a Crystal Light punch.
Oh, okay.
This I thought was
coffee.
one of the coffee. Be good, huh?
I believe in me.
This would be I think is one of the most interesting quotes to do with this topic. So Josiah Stoll in the 1830, because we've got, that's going to be the video. Let me go back here. So Josiah Stoll in 1830, there's the trial. RFM pointed this out. This is after the 1826 glass liquor trial. It was a secondary trial that was in 1830. And this quote comes out of it. This is the newspaper reporting what was said during the trial. And they have this quote: "It was unknown to Smith that witness Josiah Stoll saw a corner of the Bible," meaning the Book of Mormon plates, so called by Smith. "Told the witness the leaves were gold. There were written characters on the leaves. Prisoner was commanded to translate the same by the Lord, and from the Bible got from the hill, as foresaid. The prisoner said he translated the Book of Mormon." But then we get what I think is the coolest part of this, Dan. Josiah Stoll, this was another comment from that. "Josiah Stoll, being by me sworn, saith that Smith the prisoner went in the night and brought the Bible. Witness saw a corner of it. It resembled a stone of greenish cast. Should judge it to have been about 1 foot square and 6 inches thick. He would not let it be seen by anyone. There's another clue, by the way, that these other statements of it being in a cloth have some truth to them. He would not let it be seen by anyone. The Lord had commanded him not. It was unknown to Smith that witness saw a corner of the Bible. So whatever Stoll saw, he relates it to being like a rock in greenish in cast. And whatever it was, it seems to not be the same thing that the 3 or 8 witnesses are claiming to see, because they don't seem to notice anything green.
Yeah, well, the testimony of 8 witnesses and Stoll's account can't both be true. And
right.
So you have Dan Peterson. He's the guy, one of the 3 witnesses in this apologetic presentation. He's one of the 3 scholars that brings this up.
You know what? Instead of saying scholars, can we just say researchers? Because that's what they call themselves anyway in the previous video.
Yeah, well, I don't. It doesn't bother me. I mean, so
Dan Peterson is a professor of Islam.
Yeah,
remember?
he is a professor and
Islam.
Stephen Harper is a historian and Joe Smith Papers editor.
Mm-hmm.
Casey, what's his name? Casey Griffith. He, I don't. He's at BYU professor of religion, I think.
I'm just trying to be funny because of the previous video. Yeah. Anyway.
But so Dan Peterson is the one that brought this up, but he doesn't mention the green part. Okay. He just mentions Josiah Stoll as one of the informal witnesses to the plates. He saw and hefted the plates, and that's all he wanted to say about it. But when you look closer, whoops, we got a problem here. And right up at the top, I'm trying to show the corner. This is actual from the movie, from the documentary, but you can barely see it. But it's the corner that Josiah Stoll supposedly saw of it. Mm-hmm. Dan Peterson also made a statement of how casual Joseph Smith was in laying the plates around, and which is a farce. It's not. That's not true. I don't know how he got that idea, because it's complete opposite. But he says that Joe Smith was casual, and somebody might lift up the cloth and peek in it, and Joe Smith didn't have any worries because they would have just saw the plates. They wouldn't have seen a rock or something like that. Well, this mentions a rock, which I thought was quite ironic to his statement.
Well, the whole thing about this is that based on this whole criterion of embarrassment, this is one statement about a view of the plates that strikes me as the most likely to be correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it fits my theory, but some apologists try to make it fit the Tumbaga theory, because most Tumbaga is green. The stuff you see in museums have been all cleaned up and everything, but mostly it's tarnished. It's not necessarily green though.
But that would run counter. So again, Moroni said the plates were gold, but what the church and its apologists say is that what Moroni meant and what everyone in the church means is that they're golden in color, and that isn't explained by tarnished green Tumbaga. That has to be nice, clean Tumbaga.
Right, there's a problem.
Yes, there is.
That and the 8 witnesses also. But if it's my theory that Joseph Smith cobbled together some plates, they're not all pretty and everything, like some people try to reconstruct the plates out of sheet tin. Back then the tin was a little more, had a more iron to it, but Joseph Smith didn't get sheets and cut them all nice and neat and poke holes and run rings through them, or a rod. They used rods back then, maybe to make bucket handles or straps around buckets or nails even. So my idea is that Joe Smith got various things, various scrap metal, from various places. Another theory, and it could include copper. It doesn't have to be tin. It could include copper. Some of it turned green. Sometimes they painted tin, though. Also, tin doesn't rust, but they would make tin roofs and they would paint them green or red. And you can on eBay buy stacks of tin plate, tin shingles, stacks of them, very thick, and they're usually embossed, not simple tin. So they're really fancy, from fancy roofs, so that they salvaged from tearing down buildings or re-roofing old buildings. But they did use tin. Tin was used, or zinc was used, but they would paint them either green or red on the roof. But they didn't have to, but it would be less shiny. And
Dan, what if Josiah Stoll was right here and it was a freaking
Yeah.
rock? What if it was a rock?
oh, yeah. But what about the rings? You'd have to wrap rings around a rock.
Oh, he didn't see the rings here. He just saw the corner of it, right?
Yeah, but they eventually fill them. And now back to what Dan Peterson said about the casualness of letting people fill them. And
Yes, he says he just leaves them lying around with a napkin. He goes off to go work, and
he goes off
totally,
working, and he's
totally unconcerned that someone might look underneath the napkin and see the plate. So obviously they must be really plates. Otherwise, he wouldn't have allowed them to be subject to that kind of inspection without his being present.
And the evidence for that seems to be
sleight of hand there by Dan Peterson. It's not. So Joseph Smith was instructed by the angel to have a box ready so that he could put it in right away as soon as he got home and lock it up. And that he didn't have that box, but as soon as he got home, he got Hiram Don Carlos went and ran to Hiram's cabin, which was on their side of the line, and told Hiram, where he was living with his family, that Joseph needed a box. So Hiram dumped it out on the floor and ran to the house. They put the plates in and locked it up. Okay. Then the next place it was is underneath the hearth. Okay. The next place after that was in the cooper's shop. Right. They tore up the floor. They put it under the box under the cooper's shop, and they put the floor on there. And then, according to the story, the cooper shop floor got torn up by the money diggers looking for the plates, but the plates were safely in the loft. They could look in their stone and see where the box was, but they couldn't see where the plates were. In the same little tiny shed, they missed it in the loft. No, it's another one of Joseph Smith's lies that he's the one that broke the box to create either excitement, or he didn't like the box. He wanted a better box built. But he's the one that broke the box.
Yeah. All right. So go ahead,
Can I just say something about that last thing with the green stone? Because there's something else that strikes me, and it's the dimensions that Josiah Stoll's talking about. He's talking about this different dimension, I think.
Yeah.
Where he says 1 foot square, these plates are 1 foot square and about 6 inches thick. Once again, this looks like the kind of plates that they have Joseph Smith putting up on the stump for the 8 witnesses. And yet down in the lower left corner, you said that's a still from the movie, Bill?
Oh, I don't know that. This is
no. Well, that is,
we,
but I colored it green on the lid.
Yeah, and we will see. So what happens is we have contradictory descriptions of the plates themselves. And what this movie does is, instead of highlighting or talking about the discrepancy between the two, they incorporate both descriptions of the plates in different scenes of the movie. That's what I see happening. And I'll bet that when the running scenes are going on, it's the plates that are 6 inches thick and maybe 1 foot square. But then in other situations, they're going to have this nice one, which is like 6 by 8 by maybe 8 inches deep or so, which is what other witnesses describe. And it's what I'm used to seeing when I see replicas of the Book of Mormon. I'm not used to seeing replicas of the plates that are in the description or the dimensions described by Josiah Stoll, and apparently Joseph Smith Sr. as well.
And by the way, if you're going to throw Josiah Stoll out as the witness statement being credible, he's another witness to the Book of Mormon, and you leave out the fact that he saw a green rock, and you leave out the fact that the size is different, you're sort of preferencing, you're sort of shielding your audience from knowing the full story, and you're pretending like it's nice and clean, but it's not nice and clean. Anyway.
And they're going to do the same thing in this next scene, which I think is the one that I saw a glimpse of when you put it up.
Yeah.
There's the discrepancy between did Joseph Smith read off the plates, which never was described happening by any witnesses that I'm aware of, but it came to be the accepted portrayal of Joseph Smith's translation of the Book of Mormon in artwork in the church, and continues to be today. But then we find out that no, the plates usually weren't even there. They're in another room. They might be wrapped in a napkin or somewhere else, and that Joseph Smith actually has a seer stone in his hat. And he places his face over the hat, and then he reads the words. So what we have here, instead of talking about those two different things, like the dimensions of the plates, they're going to include both of those in this scene where he has the hat. Presumably there's a rock in it. We never see it. He never puts his face over it. He never really commits himself to the true version of how it was he translated the Book of Mormon. And he's got the plates over there to the left, and he'll kind of look back and forth between them. So now it's like 50-50.
Yeah, and I don't know if the next one shows the video clip of this, but my point of putting this up was because here we are now, we're back to the curtain again. And you got a curtain in the middle of the table, and
so the plates can be there.
Yeah. And so I just want to ask you, Dan, I know there's a statement in regards to when Martin Harris is part of the translation about a curtain being up.
Yeah.
And then there seems to be some indication from later scribes, Oliver Cowdery namely, where there's a curtain in the doorway to block people from outside the room from just being able to walk right in, but that the curtain splitting the translator from the scribe isn't a thing. And what I'm wondering is can we make room that for Martin Harris, maybe there is a curtain splitting the two of them, and then the other scribes are dealing with an entirely different situation. They're not running into a curtain between them and Joseph, but there's a cloth, the doorway to keep other people out. Is it fair to see it that way?
That's David Whitmer.
Yeah.
David Whitmer says there was no curtain between the scribe and Joseph. The curtain was to keep visitors who knocked at the door from seeing what was going on, because they were downstairs for part of the time, evidently, and then part of the time they were upstairs. Somehow got a room.
But just because David Whitmer says there's no curtain between them doesn't mean in the earlier stage of translation, when Martin and Joseph are working on it together, the 116 pages, etc., that there isn't a curtain between the two of them.
Okay, so the only mention of a curtain is by Professor Anthon. Okay, Professor Anthon says, tell the guy behind the curtain that I'll take the curse on myself if you look, right? So this was an early phase, February 1828, when Harris went to pick up the characters, Book of Mormon characters, to take to Professor Anthon. And so Joseph Smith had to copy the characters supposedly off of the plates. So he went behind the curtain to copy off the characters from the plates and then handed them out to Harris. Okay. After that, there is no mention of any curtain being used. Okay. Yeah. So whenever Martin Harris gave a testimony of the translation, it was always with the face in the hat. Remember, he took the stone out of the hat and switched it and tried to fool Joseph Smith, but he didn't fool Joseph Smith. And he talked about the detail of Joseph Smith dictating with his face buried in the hat. Whenever he gave his testimony, he never talked about a curtain. The same, and this is for the lost 116 pages. Okay. So, and Emma, she also never mentioned any curtain in any of her testimony, and only mentioned the Joseph Smith dictating with his face buried in the hat hour after hour. And that's also during the loss of the 116 pages, when Emma was scribe for part of it, here and there. And she may have been a scribe after that even. But she did make it clear that the so-called Urim and Thummim was not used after the loss of the 116 pages. She made that like a dividing line. She was certain that it was not used after the loss of 116 pages, and that the stone was used after that. And if that's true, that means Oliver Cowdery did not testify truthfully when he would ever talk about the Urim and Thummim being used during his translation, because Emma would have seen that. And she said it was never used after the lost 116 pages, and Cowdery came after the lost 116 pages. So Cowdery is willing to tell the official party line with Joseph Smith about the Urim and Thummim to downplay magic. And Cowdery, we know, did downplay magic in his history in the Messenger and Advocate. He downplayed magic, talked about stories about slippery treasures and such, and that was only crossed Joseph Smith's mind as he was trying to get the plates, but he never described it as part of the process, even though he described Joseph Smith being hurled back, with a tremendous shock when he touched the plates. Well, and that's what made Joseph Smith think of it, but that's as far as he went in describing the coming forth of the Book of Mormon in the magic folklore genre.
Yeah. Okay, let's hit the next clip here. Oh, I think we did this one already.
On the hat thing, I wanted to comment was that outsiders watching that would not know what the hat was for. We know what the hat's for because we're conditioned into the stone in the hat. But anyone non-Mormon looking at that, not familiar with the history, would not think that. They would just assume Joseph Smith is translating from the plates. And there is Jonathan Neville. He argues that Joseph Smith actually learned Reformed Egyptian, and he did look at the plates and really did translate them. And it took a lot longer than the couple of months that is assigned to that, usually to that process. So
that's a tight translation.
Yeah, well, and so there are people around who think that Joseph Smith did look at the plates and translate, but they don't know the history that well.
But they did get the color of the hat right. It's white.
White.
Yeah. All right.
It's a white top hat.
Here's the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, my friend. Go ahead and finish your thought.
They have a top hat. One of the 8 witnesses wears a white top hat.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
You get to look at it at least.
It's probably the same one.
Oh.
Is it speeded up?
She's old.
Hello, Mary.
Hello.
Who are you? Can we pause?
An answer to your prayers.
Did you speed this one up, Maven?
I thought I did, but maybe not. Maybe this one isn't.
This lets you know how slow all of this goes.
Right. I just wanted to say, like, as a woman alone, because the men have all left, right? If I'm walking to my barn and not notice a man all of a sudden in that proximity that I did not notice starts talking to me, that is not how I would react. That's all I wanted to say.
I would shriek. I don't know if that's what Maven would do. I would have
that would be
right
really
there.
I mean, especially when you're out, it's very rural, like it could be legitimately dangerous. So even if it was nice and a nice guy or something, just being surprised by an adult male that you have not seen, and he's right there, like basically just right on top of you. Like, it's too late if he was going to be an evil person, like basically walk right into it.
In cold blood.
Yeah.
Hello,
I would have freaked out if and he just does it so casually. He just puts the hat on and then hello, I just would have been like, oh my God. So
no, but anyway. Some of the accounts do mention that she was frightened at first.
Yeah. They should have done
not
that was after he showed her his monkey in a box.
Hello, Mary. You want to see my monkey in the box?
Do you have 2 quarters to?
That's why you don't go out to the barn alone.
Oh, all right. Anyway, let me rewind this just a touch.
Bill has never gotten over the story of Moroni showing up with a monkey in the box.
No, here. Let's play this one again.
Hello, Mary.
Who are you?
I've been sent in an answer to your prayers. You've been faithful and diligent in your labors. The Lord knows your heart. He also knows your weariness. Come, sit a spell.
Not a chance.
It's only proper that you should receive a witness, that it might strengthen your faith. Let me show you the record of the Nephites.
Stranger danger. I love your monkey.
So,
That's the biggest monkey I've ever seen. I'm sorry, guys. This is a sacred occasion. I apologize.
This is the same one we talked about in the life of Moroni. By the way, they've got him in the same outfit. They did a good job of.
They went off this picture. They went off the picture.
Yeah. But if you remember us doing this episode, the way the account goes was that he was hiding underneath the shed built on the ground. And you had mentioned like the only way that could really be explained is if it was a white toad or a salamander, right?
And Dan had mentioned this too, he's under the shed the night before or the day before or earlier that day. He's under the shed. And so he's apparently in some sort of, it's a teeny weeny living space under the shed. He has to be a teeny weeny creature. So it's probably a salamander or a toad. And then he comes out and he transforms into this nice gentleman.
Yeah.
I think it was an apparition, and it's become more materialistic like this. It doesn't make any sense that Mary, before the 3 witnesses are going to fulfill D&C 17 and see them with, spirit, the eye of faith, and that they need faith and no one can see them without the faith, that Mary sees both the plates and the angel and gets the testimony from the angel before they do in a natural way like that.
Dan, her name is Mary. Her name is Mary. You can tell the New Testament echoes, can't you?
Oh, okay.
Of the resurrection and the witness and showing up first to Mary.
Yes, I think Maven wants to know that Mary used to call him Brother Nephi because they were translating the first part of was it Nephi or Moroni? Well, that's a problem. There was no name of any of these angels until later. So I don't know how Mary gets Brother Nephi unless she's influenced by what's being translated in her house and thinks that it is Nephi.
Does it seem strange to you guys that sometimes Moroni shows up in a white robe, and other times he's wearing the exact clothes of the 1830s? Doesn't that seem strange? It just seems like an odd thing. Like if God's going to have an angel show up to Joseph wearing a white robe and looking like an angel, why does he have that same angel going into the coat closet and changing into the garb of the 1830s?
Well, I'll tell you how that happened. So this is a power suggestion operating on all these people. And so when Whitmer is transporting Joseph and Oliver up to his father's house from Harmony, Pennsylvania, alongside of the road, alongside of the wagon comes this man. It looks like that.
Yep.
A real man, though.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Carrying a knapsack with probably a Bible in there. Maybe he's a Methodist, circuit rider or preacher. And he's walking along and he's talking to them. And then they offer him a ride and he declines, and they're continue on for some time, and then they feel funny and they turn around and look, and the guy's gone and they can't figure out where he went. Joseph Smith explains to them that was Moroni, or whoever, the angel. I don't know what name he gave him, but according to David Whitmer, it was Moroni, on his way to the hill Cumorah to bury the plates. And in some tellings, it gets to where the man tells them that he's Moroni on the way to Cumorah. But the reconstruction that I made from the earliest accounts is that the interpretation of who the man was Joseph Smith that gave it, because they looked around, the guy's gone, where did he go? They don't know where he went. And then they looked to Joseph, like, explain this, you're the seer, and he explains it. So I believe Joseph Smith's just taking an opportunity here where it seems like there's a miraculous thing that happened, but not. The guy laid down and took a nap in the tall grass. Who knows what he did? But because they weren't looking, and they turned around, he's gone, and they couldn't figure out where he went. Well, they couldn't figure it out. The end. So that's where it should have ended, right there, instead of, oh, what was this? So, and then they made it into some kind of supernatural event. Well, when David gets home, he describes this to his mother. His mother knows what the angel looks like now, right? And when she sees the angel, he has a beard. He looks, he has these regular clothes, and so do the people that are making this movie. And so the bearded angel then also is what they see in the vision of the three witnesses.
Yeah. By the way,
our suggestion.
No,
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the thing that struck me when I was watching this recreation of the Mary Whitmer story is that she sees a regular looking guy that she describes as an angel, which then makes me think, okay, so when other people in Mormon history are saying they saw an angel, what is it that they actually saw? Did they just see a regular guy too?
Yeah. The three Nephites, they're like that.
I just want to point out, and I think this is a big deal. Dan Peterson, for sure. I would guess Stephen Harper, and I don't know much about the third guy, but these are Mesoamerican Hill Cumorah apologists. They are wanting to refer to the Mary Whitmer as a extra witness of the Book of Mormon plates, but they don't really want to use the testimony about that experience because it's wrapped up in other experiences that would decimate the things they hold to be true. So in the account where the Mary Whitmer meeting Moroni story is told, let's go up here. He walked alongside the wagon and wiped the sweat off his face, smiling very pleasant. David asked him to ride, and he replied, "This is the angel. This is Moroni. I am going across to Hill Cumorah." He is imposing that the hill in New York is the Hill Cumorah, and the church wants to tell you, no one ever said that was the Hill Cumorah. We just sort of drew that conclusion. No. Moroni said that's the Hill Cumorah. Now we go further down. Said that the prophet looked as white as a sheet and said that it was one of the Nephites and that he had the plates. On arriving at home, they were impressed that the same person was under the shed. Again, no apologist wants to tell you that story either. They saw where he had been. The next morning, David's mother, Mary Whitmer, saw the person at the shed, and he took the plates from a box and he showed them to her. It was likewise down further below. It was likewise stated to me by David Whitmer in the year 1877 that Oliver Cowdery told him that the prophet Joseph and himself had seen this room in the Hill Cumorah and that it was filled with treasure, and on a table therein was the breastplate and the sword of Laban. If apologists are going to throw out half of a statement to prove one point, just notice that they are absolutely disagreeing with other parts of the statement that they have no desire to show you, nor do they want to take the opinions therein, where Moroni himself is telling you that the Hill Cumorah is the hill in New York. I think that's a big deal. And I think apologists do this all the time. They use documents for whatever faithful purpose they can. And then when that document goes off into another story that hurts their case, they simply discard it and never tell you it exists. So there's that. Okay.
Good point. Very much selective presentation of evidence.
Yeah.
And this is why in a court case, you have two sides, right? You've got the plaintiff and the defense. And the plaintiff tells their story, but the defense then gets to tell the other side of the story, the one that the plaintiff usually isn't so eager to tell because it favors the defense. Can I ask you, Dan, about something in this? You do recognize the statement. I know you have a huge collection of statements. You are really an expert in this area. And I wanted to ask you what you think it means at the last sentence of that statement, the one we just had on the screen.
Yeah, I'll put it back up.
Actually, I could probably do this, if you go back there and then, is that it? Oh, no, that's not it. Here, I'll let you. There you go. At the very end, when they are who wrote this first off?
I don't know.
You don't know who wrote this, Dan?
Is this? I don't know. Edward Stevenson.
This was the account, I believe, out of Lucy Mack Smith, if I'm not mistaken. But I think she copies it from something else. But anyway, it's David Whitmer's words.
It was likewise stated to me by David Whitmer. This is not Lucy. This sounds like Edward Stevenson to me.
Okay. Well, regardless of who it is, at the end it says, but till that day. Okay, when they are translated, they're talking about the untranslated portion of the plates, which sounds like a separate set of plates now at the end, right? And he says, when they are translated, much useful information will be brought to light, talking about the cave. But till that day arrives, no Rochester adventurers shall ever see them or the treasures, although science and mineral rods testify that they are there. What is that talking about? That science and mineral rods testify that the plates are there in this cave under the hill, but nobody's ever going to find them.
Yeah, this might be Edward Stevenson. So Edward Stevenson visited the Hill Cumorah in 1893. Yeah, this got to be because he interviewed.
And this is after the year 1877, right?
Right. He interviewed him in 1887, in 1877 and 1886, I think it was. And but in 1893, he published his memoir. And in there, he mentions going to the Hill Cumorah and seeing the stones that he believed was part of the stone box that were then at the bottom of the hill. Or no, the guy that owned it said they were at the bottom and they've gotten carried away at some point. And he mentions that there was a excavation on the eastern slope of the Hill Cumorah in New York. And what happened was, remember the story about 1825, Joseph Smith takes Samuel Lawrence, up on the Hill Cumorah to get a second testimony of the plates. And so, according to Willard Chase says that they went up on the hill together, and Joseph Smith pointed out the spot where the plates were. And Samuel Lawrence was a seer also and had a stone, and he looked in his stone and he saw the plates. And then he says to Joseph, yeah, but I can see a large pair of spectacles sitting on top of the plates. Do you see them? And Joseph Smith looks in his stone and says he doesn't see them. And then he goes, well, you better look again. And then Joseph looks and he says, yes, I do see them now. Okay, so this is how the Urim and Thummim was born. But it was an ordinary pair of spectacles. It was a large pair because the mound builders were believed to be a large people, and the glasses that they would wear were a lot larger than a normal person today. Because remember, in the Book of Mormon, they found breastplates of a large size, and they are sound, made out of copper. So now that Lawrence knows where the plates are, the money diggers now want to dig them up. and they commenced to digging on the eastern slope of the Hill Cumorah. There was this huge excavation for many years. It was there. It could be seen even in when Edward Stevenson visited the hill in 1893 or before that. And others people mentioned seeing them, and that they were dug by the Rochester money digging group. But it was really the group that Joseph Smith was associated with that were trying to dig. And according to Willard Chase, Joseph Smith then later said, oh, well, I showed him the wrong location. So they would go up and down the hill with their mineral rods trying to find the true location of the plates. And even when Joseph Smith dug them out, or not dug, but removed the plates and supposedly in September 1827, Lorenzo Saunders and others went up on the hill and they walked it by course, maybe with mineral rods in hand, and trying to find the place where the plates were taken from, and they could not find any fresh dirt, Lorenzo Saunders said. And they only saw the large excavation on the eastern slope. Okay, so that's kind of what it's referring to, is other people have dug on the hill, not just Joseph Smith removing the plates, but they were trying to find the plates even before Joseph Smith removed them. So when he removed them, they said, hey, wait a minute, those are ours, right? You're in a company. He was in company with them. And so this is where Martin Harris testifies to Joel Tiffany in 1859 that Martin Harris said that the angel told Joseph Smith that he would have to quit the money diggers, that they were a wicked bunch, and that he's no longer to belong with them, and that the plates are for a righteous purpose, not for the purpose that they want. And so anyway, I don't know if that answers your question.
But so the mineral rods are basically being equated with science in this statement.
Pseudoscience, we would say. But back then, yes, they believed that there was a scientific principle by which mineral rods operated, that they were attracted to water or some sort of invisible force like magnetic force in the Earth's atmosphere, that the magnetic force would be interfered with if there's something blocking it, like gold and or water. And they had beliefs that their water ran in rivers under the ground. Doesn't exactly work that way, but they would try to find water, and they would sometimes take divining rods and put a gold coin or silver coin in the crook, and that would help locate the gold or silver. So anyway, to them, it operated, it had scientific principles. It wasn't magic only. You had to be an adept. You had to have a gift to make it work especially well. But it was a scientific, little known truth about nature, right? Because that's what magic does, is try to control nature, and learn the principles of nature and manipulate nature. So in that day, it was considered somewhat of a scientific principle by which rods operated.
Okay. It does strike me as interesting that he's saying science by means of these mineral rods will indicate the presence of these gold plates in the hill, but they're never going to find them no matter how much they dig.
Because God doesn't want them to. That's what Brigham Young kind of said back in Utah in 1877 and 57 was that, I'm telling you that there's a big library in the Hill Cumorah, but don't worry, God can protect them. God can move them, have them slip through the earth to another location if he has to.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's cut it there. We'll be on slide 26 when we come back. So let's end it. I've got the call lines open. There's already a couple of callers there. And so let's go to the phone calls. Anything else you guys want to say before we do that?
Not I.
Okay. Let's jump here. We've got 3 calls. So here's the first one. This person wants to talk about the Mary Whitmer story. Hello, Mary. What's the name? What's the name, caller?
It's Madison.
All right, Madison. What's on your mind tonight in regards to what we're talking about?
Well, I just have to tell you, as a former missionary that served in Palmyra and at the, at all these sites that you've been talking about tonight, I'm pretty surprised to hear some of these stories told this way because, I considered myself a bit of an expert on this back in the day because we had our manuals, we had all the info, we gave the tours, we were the ones giving out the information. And, you've shed some new light here for me tonight.
What single thing was the most surprising to you, Madison?
Probably Moroni being under the shed. That was pretty surprising to me. That's definitely not my site manuals. In fact, when I saw that you folks were talking about this stuff tonight, I actually ran out into my own shed and pulled out my mission stuff. And so I've got all this right here in front of me, and it's of course all very, very surface level info. And anyway, so that thing about the Mary Whitmer story, it's kind of sad to learn. I mean, the whole process of deconstructing is sad, but in particular, the Mary Whitmer story is sad to let go of because that was one of our favorites. All of us sisters loved to tell that story when we were at the Whitmer farm. I think
she saw something.
In addition to that,
I think she saw an apparition.
She probably
but
did.
Not a physical, not a normal man just visiting her. I don't think that happened. I think it was an apparition.
Yeah. Madison, when you said it was our favorite, are you talking about other sister missionaries mostly? I'm assuming.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Mary
one of our
Whitmer
favorite stories to tell. And
yeah, because it's a story when everything is so male dominated in the history and then also in the church today, and especially on a mission where you're at, where like we're teaching the gospel the same as the males do, but we still don't have any authority. We get the piece of paper with the prophet's signature saying that we're ministers officially, so we can park in clergy parking spaces at the hospital or something technically, because we are considered clergy, but yet we still can't do any of those kinds of ordinances for people that we're teaching. I think the story of Mary Whitmer really is kind of a fill-in to make us feel better and feel like God sees us because God saw Mary. And so she got to have this. And I never noticed till I left how like we're expected to take comfort in that and love that, Mary is representing us, and God, sending Mary this witness shows that he sees her and he appreciates her work and her sacrifice. That's supposed to be enough for you and I to keep sacrificing and working. But we certainly should not expect to have an actual experience like Mary. We're just supposed to be happy with hers. And I don't know, it's just that was something that kind of I noticed, and her story is used a lot, I think, for that purpose, to just kind of to keep the women calm and just say, like, look, it's okay. We know that you're burdened and you're miserable, and like it's been the same generation after generation, but look, God sees you and he appreciates your labor behind the scenes to make everything else easier for the guys. So
Madison, I got a question for you.
And that's
did you
go ahead,
taught to think that the Hill Cumorah in New York was the Hill Cumorah?
Yeah, and I'm trying to think back, because at the time, we were only allowed to relay information that was in, we called them site manuals. It's just this like homemade looking bound book. There are 3 of them. We had a site manual for the Joseph Smith farm, the Grandin building, and the Harris farm. And it says, for missionary use only. And so we were only allowed to relay information that was from those manuals. And anyway, so like, but then at, we were sort of aware on the side of like the Heartland model and the Mesoamerican model, but we weren't allowed to really like talk about that or dig into that. So yeah, like we all thought that Cumorah was right there.
Yeah.
You know, where, and because that's how we would tell the stories, like, you know, up there on that hill, you know, you can go up there and there's a monument and this is where Joseph got the plates and it's where Moroni had buried them. And that's where we have the Hill Cumorah pageant, and they show in the pageant Moroni burying them in the hill, and then, you know, time passes and then Joseph gets them out, and
there's certainly no
you just assume that it's all
in the pageant.
No, not at all.
By the way, is
Not
there
at
any
all.
chance you'd be willing to take some screenshots of that missionary manual and email them to us?
Oh, sure.
I would love to have a copy of that.
And in fact, there was, yeah, I've got, I mean,
by Don
I could probably, I can't tell you. It doesn't say it. It says copyright 2004 by Intellectual Reserve.
Yeah.
Here on the inside cover.
Yeah, I'd love.
So
I'd love
yeah,
to
you know
see
what I could
you guys
do? I
were
could
instructed to share.
Yeah, it was honestly, I loved my mission so much, and you know, looking back, it's like, well, you know, it's 18 months for something I don't believe in, but it was a great experience. And shout out to all my nermies, if anyone's listening tonight.
Madison, can I ask you
Did anyone?
There you go. No,
Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead. I've just wondered if anyone tried to like correct her, and she's like, "No, that's anti-Mormon lies." If anyone was like, "Let me tell you what really happened," but
you know, well, you know, one time when I was out with my companion in one of the small towns around Palmyra, someone was like, "Joseph Smith used a rock and a hat," and I'd never heard that before, so I was like, "That's not true." I know, because I'm a missionary. I serve where he did the translating. So, you know, and now it's like, oh my gosh.
And you got the manual with the copyright on it. You know the true scoop.
I know. I got the like I knew.
Right.
I had all the information. I thought I was set up.
And you told the story about Mary Whitmer and her encountering Moroni, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you feel tonight when you found out?
Yeah, we told that story all the time.
How did you feel tonight when you found out that part of that story, that's part of the story about Moroni being under the shed, was apparently intentionally omitted from the version that you were told to relate to other people?
Well, I mean, it just makes you feel a little bit foolish that this whole time, you know, and the whole point of our tours at the sites was to build people's faith, right? And so, like in the manuals, it says, you know, the primary objective is to hit these key points and bear your testimony. And so that was a great vehicle for testimony bearing. Was like, you know, there's this, you know, like Maven talked about, it's a story that all of us sisters really connected with. And so you tell the story, and like, you know, because she endured to the end, you know, she stuck it out and she was faithful and she was rewarded. And so you'd talk about it, and you know, you get emotional yourself, because that's how we are trained, that God conveys messages to people is through emotions. And so now looking back, it's like I feel a little silly that I used this story that I only knew a part of. You know, it's like when you I don't know, it's just you feel a little taken advantage of, and because like my intention was pure.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to I really prided myself on my mission for knowing the facts. Mm-hmm. And I would frequently go back to my manuals and make sure that I hadn't been changing stories over time. Like I was really good about, you know, I really wanted people to get the facts, and I told them the way that I thought they were, and turns out all along, you know, it wasn't quite like the way that I was telling it.
The version you told was told by John C. Whitmer, son of Jacob Whitmer and Mary's grandson, in 1888. So it's we almost didn't have the story altogether.
Wow.
And I think
So
she
it's pretty late.
Yeah. Like
she's the
almost
only
60
one.
years later. Yeah.
I think the only woman, because like Emma never received a vision. Lucy Macbeth never received any kind of a
she
vision.
is the
So
only woman.
Mary is the closest for any of us women in the church to think that God may actually send something that spiritual to a woman. I think that's the only one off the top of my head. Because if we didn't have that, then God never speaks
unless
to
there's
women
something
or
else
sends
they're not telling
messengers.
us.
Hey,
Yeah.
Mary, I'm sorry, Madison, there's always something else they're not telling you.
Right.
Well, think how great your tours could have been. You could have said, yes, here's where this happened. And here's the shed that Moroni slept under the night before.
I know. Now in hindsight, like it could have been a really great moment. Yeah.
Well,
sounds like a fun mission, though.
It was, yeah.
It was a blast, honestly. Like great mission. I came away with a lot of love for the church and the restoration, and so it's a little weird being on the other side now, but I tell my husband, he's also a former member, and we always say, like, we got to go back and visit the sites again. It'd be really cool, like revisiting. Anyway.
Well, thank you, Madison, for the phone call.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for a great show.
Good
always.
Talking to you.
All right, one more call, and we'll wrap up here. And this is Ted. He's a regular. Ted, you're on Mormonism Live.
Yes, hi guys. That last caller was really good. I'm just going to be really fast. I had to call with the man, the myth, the legend, the Vogel, but yeah, and Dan, I'm drinking the same drink you are. It's just funny, the fruit punch. Anyway, so I was calling because from the first half of the show, the weight of the plates, like Wood Radio did a, in their same campy style, they were just basically making fun of, people that are skeptical about that story. And like RFM, so RFM will know, like the Olympic weights, like the largest one is 45 pounds. Never tried to run with that, but at work, our procedure, we make aerospace parts, and our procedure is not to stack boxes that are more than 40 pounds. And every now and again, I'll get impatient if a machine's going down or something like that, and I'll grab that 45 pounds and run from one end of the building to the other. Well, not run, but anyway, it's a workout. So I texted Ward Radio, and I said, why don't you have a card and grab a 40 pound thing, run the length of a football field.
Yeah, I would pay good money to see that and film it and put it up on social media.
I'll put in $50, RFM. Let's put some money together and see if he'll take
Can I just say, there's all the difference in the world between lifting weights and doing reps with weights, right? And that's one thing. But taking a weight and then walking with it, now you're putting all sorts of stress and strain, especially on your lower back, as well as the muscles that actually have to do the heavy lifting right there. And then you take that and start running with it. And then you take that and start running with it on open ground where it's not even. This is something that becomes more and more difficult to envision doing for any period of time or any distance at all.
At a Sunstone, I did a presentation on the plates, and Spencer Lake, and if anybody knows Spencer Lake, you can find him on Facebook. He's sort of been in this space, listening to podcasts, commenting, participating with various content creators in sort of post-Mormonism. But he's a big guy, really strong, big arms. We gave him like 60 pounds of weight in a bag, and he ran about 20 feet out of the room we were in. And it wasn't a real strong run. And as soon as he got to the door, he's like, I can't do this, man. This is unbearable. It was
literally,
right.
Yeah. So anyway,
unbearable.
That's what I was just going to finish up, Bill, by saying that, that's what I said. I said, have Carden do it. And I said, have Kwaku I can't remember. I always remember him as Hermie because
I want to see
Dentist
Quaco.
from
Brad Whitbeck.
Rudolph.
Yeah, Brad Whitbeck.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And
Anyway,
Quaku's so skinny, he could probably
I said
substitute for the
because-
plates, and Carden could just run carrying Quaku.
Yeah. Right. But and so I just want to finish up by saying one more thing, because one of the things that I always ask why, like how, why. So I was like, why didn't the Lord just let us keep the plates? And now they're saying it's faith promoting and this and that. But the answer that I was given was that we have, or it was too risky because there was no way to secure them. Well, can't the prophet? So I watched Landon and Rebecca's show on the. They have the top 10 most secure vault in the world. So can't one of the prophets just call up God and say, well, like, we're having a little trouble here. Can't you just beam this thing down and us just like count the plates and just maybe take a picture of one of them or so, But anyway,
The Lord could do that if he wanted to.
If he wanted to, but because he doesn't do it, obviously he doesn't want to. And if God doesn't want to, there must be a good reason for him not wanting to. So all we have to do is figure out what that good reason is, and everything's fine. By the way, the Mormons already have probably one of the most secure facilities in the world in the vaults, the granite vaults in the mountains.
Yeah, certainly much safer than having people with metal detectors run around the Hill Cumorah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ted. Thank you for the phone call.
Good night, Ted.
Yeah, great show. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right. Anything else from you guys?
Not for me. We're at 2 minutes and 21. No, excuse me. Let's make that 2 hours and 21 minutes. If days were like hours, Captain.
Yeah.
So anyway, I had a great time. It's always great when we have Dan Vogel on the show.
Yeah. Anything from
you.
you?
Thanks
Anything from you,
for
Dan? We
inviting me.
appreciate you. Just wanted to really quickly note the folks who donated through the super chats. And I say donated, but it's just, you guys just gave money there. The donations have to go through MormonismLive.org or MormonDiscussionsPodcast.org. And you can hit the drop-down window and make a donation to Mormonism Live. But anyway, these are the super chats. Harry Henderson, $4.99, was preaching anyone else's least favorite thing on their mission.
That was my least favorite thing.
Harry Sweet, $19.99. Thanks for the episode in the series. I'll hold it dear. Martin Harris, dear to my heart this week. Watchdog, $20. RFM hasn't quoted Shakespeare tonight, I don't think. RFM.
How all occasions do inform against me and spur my dull revenge.
Look at that. All right. And let's see here. I am just one mom, a $49.99 super sticker. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you.
Tim Rathbone, $5.
Tim Rathbone.
Harry Henderson, $9.99.
Harry Henderson again.
Yeah, there's Harry in the Hendersons, and there's Harry Henderson.
And who took my lunch, Peterson? I don't know, but it looks like a farm boy, and he's heading that way at a deadly clip.
So we deeply appreciate the super chats tonight. Thank you very much. Folks, we'll be back next week. RFM, do you have anything that is scheduled for next week, or should we plan on part 2 next Wednesday night?
I think I will take what I have scheduled for next week and hopefully reschedule it. And I'm looking at the camera, and you know who you are that I'm looking at. I don't think it'll be a problem to reschedule.
Okay. We will hopefully pick up part 2 next week. Folks, we appreciate everyone who supports the program by watching. Please subscribe and like. Please share the video with your friends and family. And I think most Latter-day Saints would be interested to know that these witness testimonies didn't quite happen the way that they were told. But we'll see you next week, Monday night, 6:20 p.m. And until then, everybody have a great night.